As I was preparing for my homily this weekend, I was looking at all of the various boxes that I might check with my homiletic topic, and there is an extraordinary amount to celebrate this weekend. It's all good, but it's a little overwhelming that today we celebrate and honor our mothers in a particular way as Americans. Today we celebrate Vocations Awareness Sunday, as our Lord refers to himself as the Good Shepherd, and we're given a chance to reflect on the way in which our Lord has called us in our vocations to share in his authority. We also have the opportunity at this celebration of the Mass for the first time to pray at least on a Sunday, for our Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV. And yet more. And so my hope is to be able to touch on all of those things, at least momentarily, and manage to do so without overstaying my welcome. And I think the thread that runs through all of the celebrations this weekend is sacrificial love. Mother Teresa, at least it's attributed to her by numerous sources, once said that if we love to the point that it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love. That whatever our respective vocations are, whatever the ways in which God is calling each of us as individuals to serve him, whether that's in married life, priesthood or consecrated life, dedicated single life, all of them, if we're doing it right, are going to demand a lot of us. I mean, let's be honest, even doing them poorly will probably demand a lot of us, but certainly doing them well will demand a decent amount of us as well. That love, by its nature, demands sacrifice. But as God made us for that sacrifice is something that fulfills us at the deepest part of ourselves. There's this beautiful statue I remember seeing a number of years ago, and I tried looking it up in preparation for my homily, but there are so many different takes on it that it's not just one statue. There are dozens of different statues on the same theme, and so I was hoping to give you like a place and a name and an artist, and there are just too many of them. You could probably just Google the theme and you'll find it. But it was this image of, and I think in the original version I saw it was a father, but I've seen versions of it where it's a mom, where it's both parents, where it's a much larger statue that clearly is pockmarked with holes, handing one more chunk of itself to a smaller statue to complete itself. That the implication is that it's a parent giving of themselves to make their child what their child will be. That it's an image of self-gift, that recognition that if we love somebody, we pour out our life's blood for them. That in a mysterious way, in investing ourselves into them, we help to form them into the person that God makes them to be. That's something that we see in a particular way in our moms. Hopefully, that's the image of a mom that God desires us to be able to have in our hearts. It's the image that God desires us to be able to call to mind when we refer to the church as our mother. That's something that if we're doing it right in our fatherhood, whether biological or spiritual, that we're sacrificing for our kids as well. It's the reason a couple of weeks ago in my homily I had talked about the room where the next Holy Father goes to vest for the first time after he's elected, being called the room of tears. That for some guys that takes longer than others. Leo was in there a while. Now, he had stated that part of the reason he was is because he's a very logical, linear thinker, and he wanted to write notes, which popes almost never do for their first speech as the Holy Father. He wanted to actually have something in front of him written down. But I suspect a little part of that was him getting the tears out of the system too. That recognition that they've been elected and they've been called by God to pour out their life's blood for the church, to take on a job that is too big for them, that can only be done by the grace of God, is overwhelming. And I think maybe for some of the moms and dads here, it's a similar recognition to the first time you realized you were going to have your first child. Like all of a sudden life changes a little bit. And it's exciting, and it's terrifying, and it's overwhelming. That our Holy Father, who had already been a father for many years, was relearning the experience of being a dad for the first time in the room of tears. That he was being reminded by God of what it means to give until it hurts, to love until it hurts, to the point where there is no more hurt, there is only more love. And then finally this weekend, to tie it all together, we celebrated our first communicants, that our second graders had the opportunity to receive our Lord Jesus in the Eucharist for the first time. That it's always an extraordinary celebration, and it's deeply edifying to me to see the joy of our second graders. It's a reminder of the joy that I ought to be taking every single time I receive communion. And I'll be honest, some masses I do and some masses I don't, especially if it's like the third one on a Sunday. But it's a powerful reminder that just as God has called us in our love to give of ourselves, and whatever our respective vocations are, that he never calls us to something that he himself is unwilling to do first and more fully. That Jesus, in calling us to self-sacrifice, led the way. That our Lord Jesus, in his death on the cross and in the gift of himself in the Eucharist, has given himself perfectly so that we might become what it is that he's made us to be. That Jesus is the perfect model of that statue of the Father taking of himself so that his son or his daughter might be built up perfectly and completely. And so as we prepare to receive our Lord Jesus in the Eucharist at this Mass, whatever our given vocation is, whether it's mother or pope, whether it's priest or biological father, whether it's just child of God at this point in our lives, and it is so for all of us, we ask God for the grace that we need to follow the example that he himself first gave us, that we might not be afraid to love until it hurts. Because as Mother Teresa reminded us so beautifully and powerfully, the paradox is that once we love until it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love.